The obsidian chamber of the War Council hummed with tension as Captain Arya Voss stood at its center, her combat armor still scorched from plasma fire. Around her, holographic projections of the galaxy's most powerful warlords flickered like angry gods. The Crithian Dominion, the Solari Collective, the Vortian Empire, all had united for one purpose: to demand answers from a single human soldier. "You have violated the Exodus Protocol," High Commander Zalthor's voice boomed, his triple-jointed mandibles clicking with barely contained fury. "You were ordered to evacuate Sector 7. Instead, you remained behind enemy lines with them." The word dripped with venom. Arya's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Behind her, pressed against the chamber's energy barrier, 7 small forms huddled together. They were Kael'ren cubs, offspring of the very species the Coalition had been fighting for 3 years. Their obsidian fur bristled with fear, their luminous eyes wide as moons. "The Kael'ren are predators," Counselor Mesva hissed, her serpentine form coiling in agitation. "They have consumed entire colonies. They know only hunger and violence, yet you risk war crimes charges to shelter their young?" Arya's hand instinctively moved to her sidearm before she forced it back down. She had faced plasma storms, survived boarding actions on derelict ships, and held the line when entire battalions broke. But standing before the Council, defending the indefensible, felt like staring into a black hole. "Captain Voss." Admiral Krent's hologram leaned forward, his scarred face softening slightly. He was human like her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. "We need to understand. The Kael'ren slaughtered the research station on Praxis 9. They left no survivors. They are, by every measure, the enemy. Why would you protect their cubs?" The chamber fell silent. Even the eternal hum of the station's reactor seemed to hold its breath. Arya looked back at the cubs. The eldest, Thren, stood at the front of the group, his small body trembling but his stance defiant. His eyes met hers, and in that moment she remembered. 4 weeks ago, the evacuation sirens had screamed across Firebase Tango. The Kael'ren fleet had broken through the defensive perimeter, and orbital bombardment would begin in 30 minutes. Arya had been securing the armory when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to war. Crying. She had found them in the cargo bay, huddled behind supply crates. 7 Kael'ren cubs, abandoned or lost in the chaos. The oldest couldn't have been more than 5 solar cycles. When Arya approached, they scattered like startled shadows, all except one. Thren had stood his ground, his tiny claws extended, his body positioned between Arya and his siblings. He was terrified. She could see it in every quivering muscle, but he didn't run. "Easy," she had whispered, lowering her weapon. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cub had studied her for an eternal moment. Then slowly he had lowered his claws and stepped forward. He placed one small paw on her armored boot. He chose her. The other cubs had followed one by one, emerging from the shadows to press against her legs. They were shaking, starving, and utterly alone. The evacuation ships were already launching. She had seconds to decide. She chose them back. "Captain Voss." Zalthor's voice snapped her back to the present. "You will answer the question, why?" Arya turned to face the Council fully. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried the weight of Durasteel. "You want to know why? Look at your own histories. Every species in this council was once considered a threat. The Crethians were mindless hive creatures. The Salari were savage telepathic predators. The Vortians were genocidal machines. Humans, we were emotional primitives too dangerous for the stars." She took a step forward, her boots echoing in the silent chamber. "But someone gave each of you a chance. Someone saw past the fear and the violence and recognized that survival and sentience aren't mutually exclusive. The Kael'ren are predators, yes. They have committed atrocities. But these cubs," she gestured behind her, "they haven't chosen violence. They chose trust." "A convenient narrative," Mesva sneered. "They are young now. Give them time and they will grow into the monsters their parents were." "Maybe," Arya admitted, "or maybe they'll grow into something different. But we'll never know if we don't give them the chance." Admiral Krent studied her carefully. "This could restart the war, Captain. The Kael'ren matriarchs see their young as sacred. If they learn we're holding cubs, they'll interpret it as an act of war. Then let them come." Arya's voice hardened. "But they won't find executioners waiting. They'll find someone who protected their children when they couldn't." Zalthor's mandibles clicked in what might have been frustration or respect. You realize what you're asking? To grant asylum to enemy combatants? I'm not asking for asylum for enemy combatants. I'm asking for asylum for children who had nowhere else to go. Behind her, Thren stepped forward. The cub moved until he stood beside Arya, his small body pressed against her leg, his luminous eyes fixed on the council, and despite his size, there was something ancient and knowing in his gaze. The other cubs followed, forming a line behind their sister in arms and their brother in choice. The War Council watched in silence as the species they had deemed irredeemable stood beside the human who had gambled everything on their potential. Finally, Admiral Krent spoke. The question was asked, Captain. Why protect them? You haven't actually answered. Arya looked down at Thren, at the small paw still resting on her boot. She thought of all the reasons she could give: tactical advantages, political leverage, moral imperatives. But in the end, there was only one truth that mattered. She looked back at the council, her hand resting gently on Thren's head. Because they chose me, she said simply, and I chose them back. That's what humanity does. We don't abandon those who trust us. The holographic projections flickered. For a long moment, the fate of 7 small lives and perhaps the future of an entire species hung in the balance. Then Zalthor's mandibles clicked once, definitively. Motion to grant provisional asylum. Those in favor? One by one, the lights flickered green. Arya released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Behind her, Thren made a sound. Not quite a purr, not quite a chirp, that sounded remarkably like relief. The War Council adjourned, and Captain Arya Voss walked out of the chamber with 7 cubs trailing behind her, toward an uncertain future built on the fragile foundation of choice.